Let's switch gears to talk about another one of Steven Spielberg's contemporaries, and that's George Lucas. Because a lot of people have been comparing the new Zack Snyder movie, Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, to Star Wars.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is the we'll talk about this for a few minutes because again, the time is my enemy. But yeah, this is the sort of the surprise movie review of this conversation. You were really knocked out by Rebel Moon. I think when we talked last about American Fiction, you had mentioned it was one of your favorite films of the year. Is that still the case?
Well, yeah. Well, today I actually posted at National Review my better than list, and the top films on the better than list are John Wick 4 and Rebel Moon. You had mentioned George Lucas and Star Wars, so we can go directly to Rebel Moon to talk about how Zack Snyder in Rebel Moon, in my view, and in the view of a lot of people who enjoy the film, has taken upon himself to remake the Star Wars saga or the Star Wars master story uh, according to his own imagination. And but I say he's remade that master story for an adult sensibility. Uh, that adult sensibility defining Zack Snyder's filmmaking as being uh, visually dynamic, extremely kinetic, as well as erotic. But also, it's a sensibility that depends on expressing itself through mythology, and this is what you get in Rebel Moon. I think, in a way, it's also what you get in John Wick 4. I think of them both as being examples of pure cinema, meaning that they are based on kinetics, based on movement, and how movement can uh, express ideas about morality. And I think that in itself is the thing that makes Rebel Moon particularly different from Star Wars. Uh, a film, a two-parter. We'll get the next part this year, later this year. A two-parter about moral choices that characters make. And I don't think that the George Lucas series of films, whether he directed them or not, are at all about moral choices. I think they're just childish entertainments.
I can see that. I mean, I think he has said that he made those films for, they're basically kids films or family films. I think a lot of the fandom that has cropped up in the last 40 some years has kind of given them more significance and more maturity than the original films warrant in some cases. Maybe not Empire Strikes Back because that's probably the darkest and most mature of the original trilogy. My issue with Rebel Moon, I enjoyed it for the most part, but I felt like Zack Snyder was trying to make his own sort of, as you put it, an adult version of Star Wars. I just wish he had strayed a little bit further away from some of that Star Wars template because for every moment, I think in your National review of Rebel Moon, or maybe in referring to it, you had mentioned poetry. I think there is a lot of poetry in the spirit of Rebel Moon. I appreciate that. A lot of subtle moments. Some people have said, "Oh, the scenes go on too long because characters are just staring at each other." I think there's a lot to be said in a meaningful look, and this movie has a lot of those. But for every great moment of character development and character surprise, like what happens towards the end with the quote unquote Han Solo character turning out not to be the heroic rogue that we might thought he was. There are moments like the very end of the film, which, yes, I'm going to spoil it, but the main bad guy gets into a fight to the death with Cora, our Sophia Butella, who's our Luke Skywalker stand in, if you will. He ends up falling, we think, to his death into this fiery abyss. And that's it. Until we cut back to ships flying in to pick up this, broken, charred body to take him back to a spaceship and rebuild him in a new body, which is the end of Star Wars uh, Part 3 Revenge of the Sith. It was like if they had just lopped off that moment, I think it would have been about the perfect ending to that film. But I kept having these stop and start moments throughout Rebel Moon where I'm like, okay, this is really good, but that's Star Wars. This is really good, but that's Star Wars. I was looking for more than an homage, I think, in some respects, So I'm curious, did that bother you? I don't, it doesn't sound like you've got, I mean, I am a child of Star Wars. I was born the year this movie came out. So it's sort of in my DNA. You are, it's fair to say, a little bit older than I, so might not have that deep blood connection to it. So did that bother you? Did you pick up on it? Or did you feel that Snyder was in some ways elevating that material by incorporating it into his vision?
I have no great regard for the Star Wars series,
Okay.
though I agree with you that Empire, the Empire Strikes Back is the best of them. But I have no special affection for any of them. They were always too childish for me, even though I think Empire Strikes Back works in narrative terms. It works because it has a cliffhanger. Cliffhangers can be wonderful, and so why shouldn't Zack Snyder have his own cliffhanger? Why not? But Star Wars means nothing to me. But it also obviously it apparently means a lot to a lot of people, and it's part of the culture. It's in the culture, and Zack Snyder has to acknowledge that, and in acknowledging it, he has to deal with it. He has to challenge Star Wars step by step, story point by story point, and can I say, being the Spielberg of his era, he's able to not just match story points, George Lucas's story points, but to transcend them and to do them much, much better all the time, every time. And so why not? Why not? I saw a silly review that said that Rebel Moon was full of ideas and stories we've seen many times before. And I thought, oh, this idiot doesn't understand culture. If there is any filmmaker who understands culture, who understands the myths that have been handed down to us even before George Lucas, it's Zack Snyder. And so he is going to deal with story points that we've seen before. He's going to retell them because that's what artists always do in every culture, in every era. They retell the same points because they're trying to make these points relevant to how we think and live, not just sell popcorn. And so that's what Zack Snyder is doing. Didn't bother me at all. I loved seeing him improve Star Wars every step of the way.
What do you attribute to, I mean, this movie, it was kind of, it was anticipated. The trailer came out, everyone was talking about it, but it feels like it's sort of landed on Netflix with a bit of a mild thud, at least. There doesn't seem to be a lot of anticipation for the next installment. I don't know how much of that is down to people watching it and not responding to it, or people not watching it because of some of this critical assessment that they might be reading. But what do you attribute to it not necessarily connecting, or could it be one of those things that just needs time?
Well, all works of art need time, and great works of art take advantage of that. Great works of art prove themselves over time. That's what great works of art do. I think what's happened here is that we have a real artist, a real cinematic artist in an era where there is no more cinema. I don't want to get into Zack Snyder's corporate troubles with Warner Brothers, where it seems like the corporation is on the wrong side all the time. They just make one bad choice after the other. But the only way Zack Snyder could practice his art is by leaving Warner Brothers, going to Netflix, who would give him the leeway that he needed, and make a piece of cinema for an era that no longer understands cinema. Ideally, Rebel Moon should never be streaming. It should always be seen on the big screen, just like John Wick 4. I don't think that film can be appreciated without being seen on a large and enormous screen. And so what's cinematic about Rebel Moon cannot be appreciated on your TV screen or on your iPad or on your watch. You have to see it big. You have to see it on a large screen, in a large scale format, in order to appreciate what Zack Snyder is doing. Because, like Spielberg in The Color Purple, what he's doing is always primarily visual. He's recreating mythology in visual cinematic terms, and I think people have lost the ability to appreciate that. I said before that Zack Snyder he has to challenge Star Wars every step of the way. He also has to challenge Marvel, and Marvel the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that word cinematic is in there for I don't know what reason, because I haven't seen a single Marvel film that looked like cinema to me. They either look like video games, they look like uh, TV cartoon shows episodes. The what are their names? The two brothers who are mostly associated with the Avengers. Um,
Oh, and I'm
the
totally
Russo brothers.
blanking. Oh,
Russo brothers.
Russo's right. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
The Russo brothers are, well, they're not as inept as Bazawuli in The Color Purple, but they're they're not special filmmakers. They're not cinema artists. They don't know how to create great images, and they don't seem to have much interest in telling stories that are emotionally or morally compelling. Those are the two things that Zack Snyder's got. He's a great visual filmmaker, and he's interested in the morality that comes through in the telling of myths. And so he's fighting Star Wars, he's fighting Marvel, which means he's fighting the mob. And I think that is why the film might have seemed to Rebel Moon might have seemed to have landed with a thud, because the mob doesn't know how to appreciate it. And I'm sure you will admit that there are people out there who are just again Zack Snyder because he challenges Star Wars and Marvel. He won't let them settle. He won't let moviegoers settle with inferior cinema, and they don't like it. And so means nothing to me that it seemed that Rebel Moon might seem to have landed with a thud. Rebel Moon exists. It's there, and it's there to be appreciated for those who will. And it's there despite the people for whom its existence is their loss.
Well put. I want to challenge you on one thing.
Okay.
As far as the Russo brothers and not making anything cinematic or sort of compelling quality, I still maintain I think the best Marvel film is Captain America: Civil War. Now, if you take out the whole Avengers fighting each other on the runway in Germany thing, which is pure comic book movie spectacle, I think the emotional story in there between Tony Stark and Captain America and their ideals about what they think essentially what America stands for in terms of registering people or not registering people, based on their superheroics or the mutant abilities or whatever. I think that really came across as something kind of hard hitting in this big summer blockbuster movie. Now, I don't think that anything that came after that. I was not a fan of the bigger Avengers movies like Endgame or Infinity War, whatever. And I certainly don't think anything that we've seen since those movies have come close to hitting on those touch points, those emotional connections from a movie that came out 9 years ago now, Civil War. But I do want to ask, kind of in closing, you really love Rebel Moon. Now, I assume you're aware that there is a Snyder cut of Rebel Moon coming out that I think is supposed to be, it's longer, possibly more hard R. Does that intrigue you, or is this a film that you think should live on its theatrical cut merits, or can it be improved by more? Or just are you just holding judgment until you see it?
Well, I have to reserve judgment until I see it, but I don't need any more, frankly. I'll I'll wait for the sequel. I'll wait for the resolution to the cliffhanger. Excuse me, that's enough for me. I mean, how many different versions of Coppola's The Godfather do we have to accept? How many different versions of Apocalypse Now do we have to accept? How many different versions of Cotton Club do we have to accept? How many different versions of, as I understand it, very soon we get a new version of One from the Heart. I'm content with Rebel Moon as I saw it, and I don't need any more. Perhaps there's more, but sometimes filmmakers, and back in the days when there used to be film producers with sensibility, sometimes their first cut or their first released cut, their first public cut, is the best cut. So I'm satisfied if there is no other Rebel Moon. I don't need any more. I think this rumor and this perhaps hunger for we need more Rebel Moon is part of the problem of there being no cinema anymore, no cinema culture anymore. That people have become invested in different kinds of hype, as if the hype belonged to them, not to Netflix, not to Warner Brothers, and they want to be a part of more hype rather than paying attention to what's in front of you and getting as much out of the movie as you possibly can. Rebel Moon can be explored. You don't need to wait for there to be given more. There's a lot there to deal with already. The arachnid sequence is just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in any movie. And Oprah Winfrey needs to see that and see what the arachnid sequence has to do with femininity and maternity. And it's that among other sequences in Rebel Moon can be studied and talked about for days. Let's do that rather than speculate that, ooh, there might be more. There might be more. I think with few exceptions, except possibly my friend John Dimitri, who writes about Rebel Moon, I think with very few exceptions, many people have gotten into the heart of Rebel Moon to understand all that it is saying and all that it is presenting to people. So let's deal with the Rebel Moon we got, and maybe there'll be more to come. But if there isn't more to come, it's a great movie as it is.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you again, because I think Oprah needs to stay away from this movie. I don't want her to watch Rebel Moon because she might get an idea of like, hey, we need to make a black feminist Rebel Moon, and we don't need that. I can't even imagine what that would look like. But okay, so let's leave it there. Armond White, again, thank you for hanging out and talking movies, and thank you for your patience through all of our myriad technical difficulties. Folks out there, you're seeing a fraction of what we had to go through to get this out to you.
Well, I appreciate your invitation and your patience.
All right. Well, folks, I'm going to link all of the National Review pieces that we've discussed. Armand's Better Than piece, his reviews of Color Purple, and also Rebel Moon down below. Check them out for sure. And anything else you want to promote, Armand, before we go?
At the moment, just those pieces and Make Spielberg Great Again, the book.
Wait. You mean
that
this book?
One. Yeah,
available at fine retailers everywhere. Also, just also another plug, because Warner Brothers needs the money. They put out the Color Purple on 4K, which this is where I got the digital copy to watch that I was doing my homework back and forth. And so yeah, if you're going to take your family to go see the Color Purple, invest that money instead in buying the home video version of Color Purple, or renting or whatever, and watching a true, I think, American classic masterpiece by Steven Spielberg. This new version, it's going to be a footnote in history. 10 years from now, when people talk about the Color Purple, much like with West Side Story, which we discussed like last year,
right?
These are footnotes. These remakes are footnotes, and that's it. That's all they are. Armand, thank you again, and yeah, we'll talk soon about something. But I just also want to wish you a Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year to you as well, Ian, and thank you.
All right, catch you later, man. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.